Tonight, a Winnipeg serial killer is sentenced in the killing of 4 Indigenous women.
This is a path forward, and this is the result of a lot of hope, prayer, aspirations from generations that have come before us.
A first of its kind Indigenous Cultural Center at Algoma University gets additional funding.
Part of reconciliation is also the part where we as Indigenous people have a part, and we need to ally.
And an organization that donates quilts for survivors of residential schools finds a new home. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. A serial killer who killed 4 Indigenous women in Winnipeg was sentenced today to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Families, friends, and supporters had a chance to read their victim impact statements about how the killings in the spring of 2022 affected them. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley and a warning there may be some distressing details.
Inside, in front of a packed courtroom, there were 12 family victim impact statements that were read. Each had a similar message. They talked about the profound loss and pain that they constantly face, including the deep emotional and psychological trauma. Many talked about sleepless nights and the fear for their own safety after hearing the gruesome details during the trial of how Skibicki was intentional and racially motivated when he killed Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Mashkode Bejiekwe, or Buffalo Woman.
I'm happy that he'll be behind bars, but no, there's never going to be enough done to help me feel any better. What he did to those women, he deserves the exact same thing.
King's Bench Chief Justice Glenn Joyal said he was reluctant to give the sentence, knowing he could only give the mandatory life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. He made 4 of them, 1 for each victim. Meanwhile, moments before, Joyal had ordered Skibicki to stand 3 times before he listened. Joyal asked him anything to say, to which he immediately responded, "Nope." That was the only word he spoke throughout the entire trial. There was also 2 other statements from the broader Indigenous community, one from families, friends, and support workers with other missing and murdered women and girls across the province. Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kathy Merrick gave an emotional statement that also talked about the broader systemic issues Indigenous women and girls constantly face. Outside, she talked about the general feelings of the people inside.
They called him a monster in the courtroom, and he sat there. He did not blink an eye. No remorse whatsoever for what he did to our women. Cutting them up, throwing them in landfills. From this day forward, that is not going to happen to our women.
Another statement not read aloud in court from the chief of Long Plain First Nation, where Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron are members. The statement said the horrific acts have had a significant effect on the people of Long Plain, and no amount of punishment will essentially be ever enough. Another statement by Skibicki's ex-wife and read in court by her mother talked about the importance of moving forward together while taking care of one another. Surviving the darkness that Jeremy spread through the terror of his actions will fill each of us with the strength and power of light. Outside, many of the family members were too emotional to talk, but Myron's family took the time to talk about Buffalo Woman.
I had to say something for Buffalo Woman too, because she is part of it. She does have a family, and there was nobody there to talk for her, so I had to say something about her. And Mercedes, we miss her very much. That pain will never go away. Never, never.
Yes, now all our focus is on searching the landfill and bringing my sister home.
Saying their closure won't begin until after the Prairie Green landfill search happens and Myron and Harris's remains are recovered, so they can take them home to Long Plain for proper burials. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
You can find much more on this over on our website, aptnnews.ca. And if you're affected by the ongoing coverage of this trial or the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls issue, the 24/7 MMIWG support line is available. The number is 1-844-413-6649. Meanwhile, advocates who focus on eradicating violence against women are urging authorities to add the term femicide to the Criminal Code of Canada.
This is a term we've been trying to get the police services to use for a while. It is used internationally. The UN does recognize this term, and we need to call it what it is.
In a first for Canada, Ottawa police used the word to describe the killing of a 47-year-old mother. Advocates say this will help spur other police agencies to do the same and pave the way for legislation. According to Statistics Canada, an average of 102 women are murdered each year because of their gender. Now an update on how the federal government, plans to help Opipon Napiwin Cree Nation in Manitoba, located more than 1,000 kilometers north of Winnipeg, after they declared a state of emergency following a series of stabbings earlier this month. Opipon Napiwin, or OPCN, went into a 36-hour lockdown on August 17th after two separate stabbing incidents. Chief Shirley Ducharme enacted an ongoing curfew and called on the provincial and federal governments for help to curb the violence. APTN News reached out to Indigenous Services Canada, who say they took immediate action by giving funding support to OPCN for health and safety patrols. The band will conduct patrols 24 hours a day for the next 2 weeks. This is in addition to funding provided for OPCN's mental health initiatives. ISC did not disclose how much money they were providing. Today, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations addressed the treaty right to tax exemption. Leadership gathered in Prince Albert to say that treaty rights are non-negotiable. The FSIN is criticizing federal and provincial governments for taxing treaty Indians. First Nation leaders have historically maintained that when the numbered treaties were signed, the Crown agreed to exempt band members from taxation. But over the years, the federal and provincial governments began taxing. Earlier this year, the FSIN Assembly passed a resolution to take action on that. The FSIN says they will take the issue to court if the governments do not stop. The Ontario government is providing $2 million in funding to Algoma University in Sault Ste. Marie. It's for the construction of an Indigenous cultural centre expected to be finished by the fall of 2026. This comes after a $5 million contribution from the federal government announced earlier this month. APTN's Mike McDonald has more.
The
director of Makwa Wakaigan says the cultural center will be a first of its kind, focused on truth-telling, relationship building, respect, and healing.
I think people are really excited to see the possibilities of this as not just a construction project. This is not just an initiative. This is a path forward, and this is the result of a lot of hope, prayer, aspirations from generations that have come before us.
Attending this week's funding announcement was Shirley Horn, founder of the Children of Shingwak Alumni Association, which is a residential school survivor group. Horn was also the first chancellor of Algoma University.
This is a journey that I embarked on when I was 7 years old and walked up the steps of then Shingwak School to become a resident and to be a part of the history that took place in this country. I'm grateful for the fact that I'm here today and to be able to enjoy the very hard work that has been done through the years.
Without the community, the survivor community, their hopes, their aspirations, their prayers, their vision, the foresight that they had, none of this would be possible.
The name Makwa Wakaigan was thought to be an appropriate name given the cultural significance of the bear.
Makwa Wakaigan is a very special name, meaning the bear, which is a symbol of the healing process that Aboriginal people have in their stories and in their lives. We did a lot of ceremony around the name and seeking the name for such an important part of Algoma University.
The structure behind me is on the site where Makwa will be built. It's located next to what is now known as Shingwak Hall, which is the former Shingwak Residential School. Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Sault Ste. Marie.
Thanks, Mike. We're going to speak with the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations after the break. But first, a hip-hop artist in Canada has a warning. It's about the use of artificial intelligence, or AI, being used to defraud fans. Sav Jonesa brings us this look at this exclusive story coming to you soon on APTN National News.
Multi-award-winning hip-hop artist Dreeza says accounts impersonating him are popping up across social media platforms. They're trying to steal money from his fans, and some are going as far as creating deepfakes, videos made to look like him by fraudsters using generative artificial intelligence.
So for me, I could see the mouth.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely manipulated. And yeah, the way the eyes are it was different. It was so weird to me. It's like, it was almost like seeing a robot version of myself, you know, and it freaked me out.
That exclusive story will be coming to you soon on APTN National News.
Welcome back. The Assembly of First Nations was supposed to hold a special Chiefs Assembly next month in Winnipeg to vote on a new $47.8 billion First Nations Child Welfare Reform Agreement that was reached with Ottawa. But this week, the AFN announced it was delaying the meeting until late October or early November to give First Nations more time to consult with the AFN on the agreement. Joining us to talk about this decision is AFN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak. National Chief, thanks for joining us. What were some of the concerns that you were hearing about the timelines that has led to the meeting and the vote on the child welfare reform package being pushed back a month or maybe more?
Certainly. Thanks, Dennis, and thanks for having us. There's been a few different regions that wanted more time to review. Of course, it's one of the biggest programs that has happened to First Nations in the history of this country, and it's a big problem in our country. Child welfare is very problematic for First Nations people in this country and regions. There's many that are optimistic and that are wanting to move ahead quicker, but there's others that still need some time to review, and there's others that still want to meet with some regions that still want to have their chiefs meetings in September. And of course it's a big discussion, and we need to make sure that we're cognizant and that we're not tone deaf to listening to First Nations in Assembly, that they want 30 extra days, as well as, of course, Quebec chiefs had some issues with translation. And, I know that there was that debate, so I knew that we have to make sure that we accommodate people when it comes to language. And I know we're at a time of Indigenous languages. We should also always make sure that our own people, that our languages, our First Nations languages are covered. In this case, they're not, and I think that calls for a big discussion on that.
Right. Oh, well, you've been out speaking with First Nations about this proposed package, the funding spread over a 10-year period. What are some of the things that you're hearing from First Nations aside from language?
Certainly. I think, there's regional representation is a big one, and we're going to have to fix that, right? We're going to have to make sure that every region is covered off in this agreement, and to make sure that regions have a voice. And I know that, of course, negotiations are always a little bit tricky, and you're dealing with other parties when you're at a negotiation table. There's many others at the table, but at the same time, I think the other parties have been very, very receptive to working towards that and having regional representation.
Was there any concern that support wasn't there at this time for the deal? And what would it mean if it was voted down?
It could be really, I think, there is always good discussion, and I think people want to understand it a lot more. I've seen many different legal opinions. I've seen many different political opinions, and it's good. I'm glad that this conversation is happening. If it doesn't proceed, then everything just falls off the table and gets wiped clean again, and guess we're back to square one. And I don't think chiefs want to go that route. What I'm hearing is, of course, they're positive on this agreement, and they just, they want to make some tweaks here and there, and we're certainly working through that towards the summer and this fall, and it'll give us time to work with the other parties at the table to make those adjustments as needed, and work with Canada, work with other plaintiffs in the case.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to the parties involved, the statement that you put out yesterday said provincial premiers and their ministers should be part of this discussion. How come?
You know what? They've been part of the problem for many, many years, and I know that we, thankfully, First Nations had a hand up at the Supreme Court, and I know that the provinces were told by the courts very strongly from the Supreme Court that they don't have jurisdiction over First Nations children. However, they're very intertwined into this area when it comes to First Nations. It's like they always want control, and they still do have control. And I know that unraveling some of that and putting more of this towards First Nations-led approach, more emphasis towards First Nations taking control over child welfare, it's going to take everybody at the table to talk through that. Provinces should not be left off the hook for their role in this over many decades. They've done, under their policies, have been very hurtful towards First Nations, and I think that they need to be held accountable for that as well.
National Chief, you mentioned, this is the biggest deal that's been presented to First Nations in a long time, if ever. Is the breakdown known yet of where the money would be allocated to First Nations across the country?
Absolutely. Like there's stuff for housing and infrastructure, trying to build that infrastructure to bring our families back, band support services, all that prevention money will now go to First Nations, but also there'll be regional breakdowns probably by tomorrow or the next day. There'll also be community by community breakdowns, and I think that we have to be open and transparent with communities on what they got before to what they'll get now. Mm-hmm. And I know that it's a big decision, but I think that they should know all that. They should know the figures before they make a decision for themselves.
Yes, I'm sure a lot of people will be looking forward to getting those facts and figures. National Chief, really appreciate you taking some time here for us today.
Thank you.
We'd like to hear what you think about the child welfare reform package or anything else you'd like to get in touch with us about. Here's how to continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, you can send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A group that makes quilts for residential school survivors is moving into a new space. That story and more still to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Summer in the White Shell at West Hawk Lake in southeastern Manitoba is where Jason Corshane was taking in the beautiful shorelines and great weather. Thanks, Jason. You can send your photos to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 20 in Halifax, sunny, and 22 in Fredericton. 18 for Kuujjuaq and Nain. Sun's out in 22 in Montreal, Quebec City, and Val d'Or. 24 in Sault Ste. Marie, sunny and 22 in North Bay. In Northern Ontario, 22 in Thunder Bay, showers and 22 in Sioux Lookout. 20 with rain in God's Lake, 19 in showers in Norway House and the Paw, 23 in Winnipeg, rain and 19 for Dauphin. Showers and 19 in Regina, 22 with rain in Saskatoon, 20 and rain in Uranium City, 23 in Buffalo Narrows. In Northern Alberta, showers and 20 in Fort Chipewyan, 21 in High Level. 23 in Edmonton, rain and 25 in Lethbridge. 22 in Vancouver, sunny and 28 in Kamloops. Sun's out and 23 in Prince George, 21 in Smithers. 16 with showers in Old Crow, cloudy and 16 for Whitehorse. 17 and rain in Yellowknife, rain and 18 in Norman Wells. 10 in Sax Harbor, 16 with showers in Polituck. 16 in Chesterfield, 21 in Arviette, 20 in Whale Cove, plus 1 with snow in Resolute, 6 in Joe Haven. An organization in Timmins that sews and donates quilts for survivors of residential schools is now working at a new location. Quilts for Survivors moved into a building in South Porcupine. CTV's Lydia Chubak reports.
Quilts for Survivors is on the move. Over the weekend, the organization that sews and donates quilts to survivors of the residential school system relocated from the west end of the city into a deconsecrated Anglican church in the east end of Timmins.
We're excited to be in South Porcupine because there's no other Indigenous organization out here, which is just, when you think about it, you're going, wait, what? And then you go, yeah, there is nothing really out here. So we're excited. There's free parking, lots of space. And once we do some electrical, we'll be at full capacity and up and running.
When the Anglican Church of Canada learned the organization needed a new space, it offered this location free of charge for the next 5 years. The organization's founder says the move began over the weekend and volunteers and employees are busy getting organized. Quilts for Survivors has donated close to 6,000 quilts, and with this new space, it's excited to ensure more of the 40,000 survivors in Canada receive one. From 1820 to 1969, the Anglican Church of Canada ran about 36 residential schools. Genier says she thinks this is a great way for the church to honor survivors and the journeys they walked.
I think it's a testament to the apologies that have been given by the Anglican Church and by the Archbishop Fred, who I've spoken with. And I think that part of reconciliation is also the part where we as Indigenous people have a part, and we need to ally. We need to honor the treaties from our perspective as well, and work with the other organizations that are in our country and are here to stay.
They are making these quilts for survivors who can wrap themselves, with we trust comfort and healing and hope. And I mean, it's just such a beautiful work that the Quilts for Survivors are doing.
Quilts for Survivors will begin operating out of its new location on Tuesday and will hold its grand opening on September 20th. Lydia Chubak, CTV News, South Porcupine.
Great organization there. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Wednesday. For much more on anything you've seen here, including the sentencing of a serial killer today in Winnipeg, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kathy Merrick will join us here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for more on the sentencing and what happens next, including efforts to change the law. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Stay tuned for an encore presentation of Face to Face. That's up next. We'll see you back here tomorrow.